The Trump administration defending the president against accusations that the New Zealand attack was his fault.
To say, oh my goodness, it must somehow be the president's fault speaks to a politicization of everything.
Kirstjen Nielsen is set to give a major speech on the state of Homeland Security.
The border is being hit by the single males and the family units, so you do need the wall.
Every time we talk about a wall, it's not about a structure, but about xenophobia. It's about racism.
Fierce flooding pounds the Midwest. Record flooding already recorded in 17 areas, and it's just expected to get worse, with the Missouri River set to crest at nearly 48 feet tomorrow.
Joe Biden's slip-up hints at a presidential run.
I have the most progressive record of anybody running for the United States, anybody who would run.
Kyle Busch, his magic number 200 in Southern California.
Live, hour 3 of Fox and Friends, the world's #1 cable morning news show. Thanks to you.
Right. Everyone's thinking about basketball now, but you got to keep in mind, you saw spring training over the weekend, right?
I did.
So are you getting in the mood for baseball?
I had a great time. Went down and saw the Cardinals versus the Nationals. And my son's team is the Nationals. I grew up watching the St. Louis Cardinals and the Royals, of course.
Good game?
It was a great game. It went right down to the
I like
last
baseball.
inning. It was fun.
If you talk to any expert or visit any psychics, they predict the Yankees will win everything.
That's because you're in a New York state of mind right now.
And he frequents the psychics.
I also think that they have just way too much talent, and they hate Boston so much. There's no way to let this happen.
All right. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. We got Jed in today for Ainsley.
Yeah, great to be here.
And our lead story. Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, is giving a major speech on the state of our Homeland Security today, where she is expected to address our southern border and the need for a wall.
It comes as freshman Democrat Rashida Tlaib calls the efforts to build a wall racist.
Fantastic. Looks like we're all on the same page. Griff Jenkins is live in Washington with the latest. Hey, Griff.
Hey, guys, good morning. Listen, when Secretary Nielsen lays out her vision tonight for a more secure border at George Washington University, look for her to further make the case that we have an unsustainable humanitarian and security crisis. Let me give you some context. Just moments ago, my source in the RGV sector tells me their central processing center is overflowing. They hold 3,000. They have more than 4,700 yesterday. This comes as Congress plans to try and override the president's veto, who, by the way, hasn't forgotten that defecting dozen of Republicans. He writes this: those Republicans who voted in favor of strong border security and the wall are being uniformly praised as they return to their states. They know there is a national emergency at the southern border, and they had the courage to act. Great job. But as you mentioned, some Democrats, meanwhile, are labeling supporters of the border wall as racist. This is Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Every time we talk about a wall, it's not about a structure, but about xenophobia. It's about racism. It is a symbol in so many ways of targeting brown and black people in our country.
Now, acting White House Chief of Staff Nick Mulvaney says such claims are absurd. And Mulvaney also expects the president's veto will be upheld when Congress returns to try and vote to override it on the 26th. Meanwhile, we're getting more and more of these numbers out of DHS. It'll be interesting to see what we get from the secretary, guys.
Wow, thank you very much, Griff. You know, it's just so interesting that someone could just choose to talk about racist. Everything's racist. There's a million people coming across the southern border. You just heard what Griff just did some great reporting. 4,700 people in a facility that holds 3,000. If they were coming through the northern border, if the Russians were coming through Canada, we would actually be the same. We treat it the same exact way. The northern border isn't perfect, but the southern border is where the crisis is. Well, to use racist is just to shut down conversation.
They do that all the time, left and right, and it means actual forms of racism. They do it with racism. They do it with all the isms, sexism. This is not a new pattern, and it's interesting because in addition to it being a humanitarian crisis, we've been talking about human trafficking, drug trafficking. I think it is important to focus on the costs of these illegal crossings. If you look at the stats, illegal crossings, there were 76,000 in February, 76,000. The cost of sheltering illegal border crossers, over $3 billion. The cost of shelter, $775 per day for each unaccompanied teen. So this does become an issue for taxpayers who are looking at this and saying, hold on a second, this isn't just about a humanitarian crisis, although that's incredibly important, but this is also about our cost and what this is costing us every day to fund.
Sure, because where's that money come from? It comes from all of us who pay taxes. Right. And if the money is going toward that project and those people, is not going to other things. At least that's what Betsy McCoy, former lieutenant governor of New York, told us about 2 hours ago. And she said one thing about this president, Donald Trump, he looks at costs, and that's why he cares about this. Watch.
Right. The Democrats and many Republicans, 25 in Congress, voted against the emergency declaration. But when you look at what taxpayers are being forced to spend to house these fake asylum seekers, it's staggering. And the president, believe it or not, actually cares about taxpayers. Right on his budget, it says putting taxpayers first. And he's doing it by trying to stop this unnecessary expense.
Here's the thing. We have so many jobs available in this country. There has to be a blitz on the other side to maybe some of the great people that are coming across. If you need a job, maybe there's work visas that we could put on a fast track to get people at work. I talk to people in restaurants on a regular basis. Over the weekend, I talked to a guy, good friends with a guy who has a pool company, and he's saying to get guys to come in with papers and have them be ready to go is so difficult. And by the way, they're paying very good money. So you have people at the southern border, in many cases, want to work. You have people in the interior of our country who need workers. They have the work ethic. There's got to be a fast track for the work visa that would work.
It's so easy. You got to have Congress change the laws, though, because right now that's the problem. We've heard from all the ICE officials and Border Patrol, there are so many loopholes, and that is why we're in the morass we're at.
So Karl Rove over the weekend said there's really two tracks. There's a two-headed horse here, and attack both. Listen.
The mix of people approaching the border has changed dramatically. In the early part of the 21st century, it was mostly single men, mainly from Mexico, coming here for jobs. And a wall helps stop those people. The asylum seekers, the family units, which is what the current immigration flow largely is, they want to show up and surrender to the immigration authorities, and a wall really doesn't matter there. But the border is being hit by both types of people. The single males, many of them from Central America now, rather than Mexico, and the family units. So you do need the wall, and you need a change in the procedures that we have dealing with families.
You could have both. They're both a problem.
Yeah, and speaking of money, 2020 is well underway. Beto O'Rourke raised $6.1 million in the first 24 hours after announcing his candidacy. That's the most of any of the Democrats. $6.1 million for Beto, $5.9 million for Bernie Sanders, $1.5 million for Kamala Harris. I can't believe that Beto outfunded Bernie Sanders from the get-go, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, and it's about $200,000 more than that. Also, Amy Klobuchar apparently raised only $1 million in the first 48 hours. You know, so many people are talking about Joe Biden, when he's going to get in. I think he's going to get in as soon as he's got more money than Beto O'Rourke does, because that way. And look, now people were talking about Beto O'Rourke over the weekend, about his rollout in Iowa and various things he said. But this morning, he changes the subject. And the subject now is, look, while Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders may lead in these polls of likely voters, Beto O'Rourke actually leads in the poll of people who open their wallet and give him some cash.
Yeah, over the weekend he had to explain why he was involved with a hacking group. Over the weekend he had to explain why
was he involved in the hacking group?
Well, I don't think there's he regrets it. He apologizes.
He was a teenager.
Yeah, he also wrote a book where he runs over people, and some fiction novel that he put together. We know about his days. He had his brushes with the law in the past. And Beto O'Rourke also made a joke that I thought was a relatively harmless joke, that he was apologizing for it profusely the next day as it relates to his wife's role as raising their kids. So that was a heck of a rollout. Beto O'Rourke, though, wasn't done. He wanted to take aim at capitalism.
There's a lot more we got to do to make sure that this capitalism is just. The only way to meet some of these historic challenges is to be able to use this engine of capitalism. It won't be government intervention or policy alone. Now, having said that, it is clearly an imperfect, unfair, unjust, and racist capitalist economy.
Once again, the R word gets thrown. We were just saying moments ago, everything is called right now. Capitalism is racist. Can't wait to see what's next.
Look, how many people donated to his Texas senator campaign? He raised $80 million, and that's one of the things the people who observe politics were saying. If he gets into the presidential, will he be able to duplicate that? Right now, he's well on the way. But the big question is, when he comes to New York City with his hand out, goes down to Wall Street, all those capitalists out there, you know he's going to say, look,
You
You're
guys are
all
great.
racist.
But
You're great.
Yeah,
I need your money.
Will he keep his hand steady enough to be able to get that money and make it gripped? Because ever since the president brought it up about his hands going everywhere, which people have noticed and Jimmy Fallon made fun of, Chris Christie also noticed something else. The president's already started on Beto O'Rourke. Listen.
Here's the genius of him politically and why it was so hard to run against him. And Democrats go, Matt just used his words. He talked about Beto O'Rourke, who he knows, and he goes, he's got to do more than just waving his arms. Well,
the labeling.
Trump labels you, and he labels you in a way that is vivid and is stark and sticks. Low energy Jeb, Little Marco, Lion Ted, Crooked Hillary, right? It all sticks. I didn't get a nickname.
But he said you don't get a nickname if you're Trump, if he respects you. He says, notice it's Crying Chuck, but it's Nancy Pelosi. And he said that Trump is smart about how he does that. But right away, from the minute he said, I don't know, his arms are flailing everywhere with the Irish leader. I don't know about him with his arms. Is he crazy? Yeah. All of a sudden, you think you're staring at his hands when he goes out there.
If Trump's listening, he's laughing right now because he knows he does this and he knows it sticks.
All right, so that's some of the stuff going on right now. Carly joins us right now. And Carly, it looks like there's a potential terror attack.
Yes, that's right. We're going to begin with a Fox News alert. There is a massive manhunt right now after a possible terror attack in the Netherlands. This is a live look at the city of Utrecht, where there are multiple injuries in a shooting attack. Police now searching apartments and houses after raising the terror threat level to the maximum. Investigators say someone opened fire at a busy tram station in a residential neighborhood. We will keep you updated as new details come out. Authorities have identified the senior airman shot and killed during a gas station robbery in Arkansas. Police say 23-year-old Sean McCow Jr. was a customer inside at the time and was shot trying to stop two armed robbers. He died at the scene. McCow, an active member of the U.S. Air Force. Investigators are offering a $10,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest. Early evidence shows clear similarities between two deadly plane crashes involving Boeing 737 MAX 8 planes. Ethiopian officials say black box data from last week's crash that killed 157 people is reminiscent of the Lion Air disaster in October that killed 189 people. Both pilots struggled to control the plane. The news comes as the Transportation Department reportedly begins an investigation into the FAA's approval of Boeing's 737 MAX 8. And those guys are your headlines.
Lots of questions.
That's right.
Thank you, Carly.
Important
All right, thanks, Carly. 12 minutes after the hour. Straight ahead. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib defending her colleague Ilhan Omar. Here's why she says anti-Semitic remarks are okay.
I think Islamophobia is very much among the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party.
Alan Dershowitz here to react next.
How to avoid ICE for kids, the comic book for getting away from the feds.
Finally, what a great idea.
You're going to want to hear
Fantastic.
This. Coming up.
Why do you think people in your own party reacted so strongly against what she said?
I know this would be somewhat shocking for some, but I think Islamophobia is very much among the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party.
Rashida Tlaib doubling down on her support for fellow Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, blaming the rebuke of her anti-Semitic remarks on Islamophobia.
Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz is the author of The Case Against Impeaching Donald Trump. He joins us right now from Miami. Professor, what do you make of her comments regarding your party? Your party has the same problem the Republicans have.
Well, they come up with a new tactic. When you accuse somebody, even truthfully, of making anti-Semitic statements, the very accusation, whether truthful or not, is called Islamophobic. So it provides a complete defense, no matter who made the accusation, whether it's whether it's Chelsea Clinton, who called out Omar for her anti-Semitic statements, and she's attacked at NYU for contributing to the tragedy in New Zealand, or President Trump, who's also accused of causing the tragedy in New Zealand. It's a new justification for anti-Semitism. You can't call anybody out. for making anti-Semitic statements, because if you do, you're guilty of bigotry, you're Islamophobic.
So Chelsea Clinton lives in Manhattan, was around NYU, and here's the incident that you're referring to, that not only are you defending her, but Don Jr. was defending her over the weekend. Listen.
This right here is the result of a massacre stoked by people like you and the words that you have put out into the world. And I want you to know that, and I want you to feel that deep inside. The 49 people died because of the rhetoric that you put out there.
49 people died because of the rhetoric that Chelsea Clinton put out there? Are you kidding?
Well, it's amazing because Omar claims that the rest of us in the world are trying to stifle dissent. That all she wants to do is encourage dissent. She's trying to stifle dissent. But yet, people who in support of her are saying, no, 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 you cannot call out anti-Semitism. That's not appropriate speech. Because if you do identify anti-Semitic statements and condemn them, as everybody in the world should, you're guilty of bigotry and Islamophobia. It's designed to prevent people from calling out Farrakhan, from calling out Omer, from calling out anybody else who's made anti-Semitic statements. You cannot do that anymore, because if you do, you and Chelsea Clinton will be blamed for every anti-Muslim fanatic statement or act that's done anywhere in the world. It's designed to stifle debate, and everybody should recognize that. We should have the complete and full freedom to call out anti-Semitism or any other bigotry wherever it occurs without being worried that you'll be called a bigot if you do it.
That's right, Alan. And she was also bullied into apologizing, which she did, which I felt she shouldn't have had to. Anyone should be able to call out anti-Semitism and not have to apologize for that. Thank you so much for being here, Alan.
I agree.
The voice of reason.
All right, 8:20 now here in New York City.
Yeah, Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway, she's here live coming up next.
Plus, California's governor defending his decision to end the death penalty.
My daughter says to me, you teach us not to kill. And yet, here I am, in a premeditated way, killing other people.
We can't do it.
On behalf of the state, I just can't do that.
Voted for it.
Well, that police officer was killed by someone on California's death row right now. His mother joins us with words for the governor coming up.
Some quick headlines. The man accused of stealing an American flag off of Trump supporters' float is behind bars. Police say Jared Handler allegedly took the flag off of Rob Cortis's Unity Bridge in New York. Cortis says other people there yelled profanities toward him. Cortis tours the country on the float filled with handmade signs to support President Trump and his agenda. And a state transportation worker needs a new job after calling President Donald Trump a delusional communist on their official Twitter account. The Kansas dot firing the unnamed employee. The agency has removed the tweet and says it doesn't reflect their views. Over to you, Steve.
I wonder who did that. Meanwhile, California Governor Gavin Newsom halting executions of prisoners on death row in California last week. This as new 2020 contender Beto O'Rourke advocated for ending the federal death penalty.
I cannot sign off on executing hundreds and hundreds of human beings, knowing that among them will be innocent human beings. I believe the death penalty is wrong.
It's not an equitable, fair, just system right now. And on, moral grounds, I oppose the death penalty.
But what about the families of murder victims still waiting for justice to be served? California police officer Larry Lassiter was shot and killed, that's his picture right there, back in 2005 while attempting to apprehend 2 armed robbery suspects. His killer, Alexander Hamilton, has been sitting on death row since he was convicted in 2007. Joining us right now is Officer Lassiter's mother, Phyllis Loya. She joins us today from Oakland. Phyllis, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me what happened to your son, Larry.
Well, my son was on a foot pursuit and he was ambushed, shot twice, and was killed in the line of duty protecting his community.
He was eventually this man who was convicted and placed on death row. You felt that that was justice served. considering what had happened. But now that Gavin Newsom has said, you know what, those guys on death row, the people on death row will not die on his watch. What's your message to him, the governor of California?
Well, I have quite a few things to say to the governor. One of them being, why did you lie to the voters of California during your campaign? Because he said he would obey the will of the people. He said that to several editorial boards. That was his position, and he was asked specifically about the death penalty. So he said that he would enforce the law. We had just passed Prop 66 in 2016. He knew what the law was. He said he would follow the will of the people. I live in a very blue state. But the will of the people regarding the death penalty is they wanted the death penalty, they wanted to stop the delay, and instead what he's now done is impose his own personal will over the voters. He betrayed us. He stole justice from us like a thief in the night. He knew he was going to do this from the gate, I'm sure. He called a meeting at 3:30 for the first time, spoke with any victims, announcing that he was going to do a moratorium the next day. He did not consider the victims. He has no heart for victims. He's all about Gavin Newsom and furthering the left agenda and furthering his own political career by betraying us.
Well, Phyllis, I know you feel like you were blindsided by this announcement. He was actually over on The View on ABC on Friday, and Abby Huntsman asked him a question, and it relates to you, and I want you to listen to his answer.
What do you tell that the parent though that still disagrees? Says, I don't have closure.
What do you say to the one that says you have to eradicate evil?
I literally said there's nothing I can do to bring your child back. There's nothing I can say to change your point of view. The fact is, though, I'm entrusted to do something much broader than just address one individual case. I've got to address a system that is race-based system of tremendous injustice for black and brown people.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think that he is in denial about the existence of what's really happening in California. First of all, he claims it's racist. I do not think it is. He talks about 6 out of 10 are people of color, but let's actually look at the real numbers. There are right now 247 white death row inmates in California. There are 266 black death row inmates, 184 Hispanic, and 40 other. All these individuals were tried by juries that were racially balanced, and his argument is flawed. It's just flawed.
I had not heard those numbers before. Phyllis, thank you very much for joining us today, giving us your point of view and telling us about your son, Larry.
Well, I'd like to also talk about my son, because one of the things that I would ask Gavin Newsom is, my son served his country as a Marine Corps officer for 6 years before going into law enforcement. He died protecting his community. Even in death, my son continued to serve. He lived a life of service. He continued to serve by being an organ donor, saving 5 people. What more could my son have possibly have done for the citizens of the state of California, or Governor Newsom, for him not to have stolen justice from us? He came like a thief in the night and stole justice from all the victims of death row killers in California.
All right. Phyllis Loya joining us today from Oakland, California. Phyllis, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
All right. What do you think about that? Email us, friends@foxnews.com. Meanwhile, the political left trying to blame President Trump for the New Zealand terror attack.
Is the president's rhetoric exacerbating the problem?
The idea is that the president had this opportunity to once again denounce white nationalism. He didn't do that.
We're going to talk to Kellyanne Conway about that and so much more coming up. And how to avoid ICE for kids. Comic book for getting away from the feds. Right back.
All right, we're back with the Fox News Alert. At least one person is dead after a possible terror attack in the Netherlands. These are live pictures, the most recent we have, as heavily armed police surround an apartment building in the city of Utrecht. There are multiple injuries at this hour.
The country raising the terror threat level to the maximum as the massive manhunt intensifies.
Investigators say someone opened fire on a busy tram in a residential neighborhood. Right now, they're trying to figure out whether or not there is a terrorist connection. Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the President of the United States. She joins us from the North Lawn on this Monday. Kellyanne, good morning to you.
Good morning.
There was a terrible news story on Friday where an alleged white supremacist opened fire in a couple of mosques in New Zealand. At least 50 people were killed. And shortly after that, there were people around the world comparing this guy and his manifesto to Donald Trump. Just curious, your reaction to that parallel.
That's predictable and outrageous. In fact, this man compares his motivations to that of the mass shooter in Norway in 2011, and those who think that's ancient history should go back and school themselves on what happened there. Also, this president condemns hate and evil and bigotry, and we will continue to do so. People should feel safe, but they should especially feel safe in their places of worship, and we've seen far too often where that is not the case. Unlike most mass shootings, this man came with pre-receipts, if you will. He put out a 70-page manifesto, and I guess everybody scoured it, searched for Donald Trump's name, and there it is one time. But he also said he aligns closely with the ideology of China. He said he's not a conservative, he's not a Nazi. I think he referred to himself as an eco-naturalist or an eco-fascist. But people should read the in its entirety. Look, someone like me who, reflecting on the first year of our time in the White House here at the end of 2017, was asked what was the worst day there. And I know the person in the media was expecting me to say something else, and I said the worst day, bar none, was the day Steve Scalise almost lost his life on that ball field in Arlington, Virginia. And thank God he didn't. But we didn't run around saying, gee, the guy said he watches MSNBC or he's a Bernie supporter. Nobody should do that. Nobody should blame folks other than the evil, hateful shooter. And I think our ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to New Zealand, Scott Brown, former senator from Massachusetts, put it very well yesterday when he says you don't give a platform or credibility to someone who's, quote, rotten to the core. Also, people should focus on what the authorities are saying here so that we can avoid copycats, that we should see the signs in the future. I know the tech companies are really struggling with how not to be a platform for hate and evil, and in this case, murder being live streamed. Yeah. So this is somebody who wanted the attention, wanted to do his, he's a rotten, evil, hateful person who wanted to kill people and live streamed it. And so we have a lot to unpack there. But I think people look for the cheap and easy, especially if it fits their own ideology. And by the way, folks, if you're not an expert on this, stop weighing in like you are. We don't need to hear your opinion on every single thing. And instead, read what the authorities are saying. See what our Secretary of Homeland Security is saying, which was there was no credible threat, thank God, to over the weekend to our mosques here in this country. But we stand with our Muslim brothers and sisters. We stand with people of every faith who are trying to. And I think the treatment of Chelsea Clinton was outrageous and ignorant and tremendously unfair. She should not have been yelled at by those people and blamed for this massacre any more than any other person should be, except the evil, pathetic, horrible, hateful man who did this.
Kellyanne, I want to get to the fight for border security that's continuing. All of us trying to figure out what the next step is going to be for the president to get the water built. Obviously, recently, he vetoing a resolution that would have aimed to block his declaration, his emergency declaration. What is he going to do next to try to fulfill this campaign promise that he made to so many people?
Well, it's highly doubtful that Congress can override his veto, so he will continue moving forward, showing that there is a security and humanitarian crisis at the southern border, not a constitutional crisis, as some of those senators who voted for the disapproval resolution would like you to believe. 76,000 migrants being apprehended in February alone, just last month. We have record numbers of unaccompanied children coming from the Northern Triangle countries. The drugs, the kids being pumped with birth control and then pregnancy tests. I mean, it's a disgrace as young as 9 and 10. So what the president will do is what he's been doing. He can use, as you know, we start with the $1.75 billion that was in the original bill, but added to that the asset forfeiture money from Treasury, the drug money that was committed at DOD, can go here. And then after he taps into that roughly $4.45 billion, then you look at some of the what we call the 2808, the military construction projects, another $3 billion plus change there. Now that $8 billion plus for the steel slat barrier, the border wall, the physical barrier that we need so that you can't go under it, over it, around it, or through it.
Right.
That is a piece, that's about 25% as I read it, of our overall security package. Also in the president's budget are those immigration judges, are more Border Patrol agents, are more enhanced technology.
So they're doing it right now. We're not waiting for it to go through the courts. Real quick, David Axelrod said this yesterday. The president drew an inside straight in 2016 with narrow wins in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. He's now vulnerable in each one of those states with no prospect of adding any state to his 2020 column. That's an area of your expertise. What's your thought on
Well,
that?
it's an area David Axelrod's expertise, too. He's a very smart man who helped President Obama win 2 terms, but I disagree. First, it wasn't an inside straight when the president got 306 electoral votes, and nobody can even see his path in the media to 270. I kept on going to TV every day saying here are 7 different paths. So that's well documented. But in addition to the ones he won, he can be competitive in Nevada, in New Hampshire, in Colorado. He should definitely be in New Mexico. We shouldn't cede any state off the bat, because which Democrat, in fact, is actually going to bust through Trump's 306 electoral votes? Where's the proof of that? Now we have 13. We have the baker's dozen running. Biden maybe will get in because I guess none of them think the other can actually beat Donald Trump. There's no strategy I see. You've got Beto O'Rourke and you've got Cory Booker promising that they would nominate a woman to be the VP. Do they not think the women running are good enough to be president? So there's a whole hot mess in the Democratic Party, beginning with right over the bridge here in Virginia. They can't get rid of the allegedly racist governor, the allegedly rapist lieutenant governor. I mean, why is the Democratic Party so powerless to go ahead and remove people from office, let alone in 2020? So I'm naming states to you. I think the president will compete again in many places where, as the incumbent president presiding over a boom economy that is the envy of the world and trying to bring peace throughout the world, he's dealing with China and North Korea and Iran in a way that previous administrations had not.
And Kellyanne, I saw that the president tweeted out that he's got a 93 approval rating with Republicans, which would help with that. Something else he's been tweeting a lot about over the last 24 hours is this GM deal. And obviously what he's trying to do is he's trying to get the United Auto Workers now to sit down with GM and keep people at their jobs.
Yes, I actually discussed this very issue with the president this morning, less than an hour ago. And he doesn't, in the president's mind, it's March. You're scheduling a meeting for October. And in the meantime, jobs may keep seeping out of the country like they did in past administrations, where people didn't care about trade imbalances, didn't care about auto and manufacturing and, of course, construction, mining, all these jobs, warehousing that are back under this president and robust under his economic and jobs growth plan. Okay. So he wants them to come to the table before that. The urgency the president feels is that he wants the auto companies to continue to stay here and return here, because he knows that that is a bedrock part of the U.S. economy and continue to be. So when you tell a businessman, non-politician, we're going to meet 7 months from now, he's just saying, can we accelerate and have the meetings sometimes faster?
All right. Well, let's see what they do. All right, Kellyanne, thank you very much.
Thanks, Kellyanne.
Thank you. Great day.
Have a great week. All right, straight ahead, How to Avoid ICE for Kids, the comic book for escaping.
Plus, a Vietnam veteran fighting for 2 decades to fly a flag honoring fallen vets outside his home, and he finally won. That hero joins us live.
Some headlines. Immigration activists in Sacramento rolled out 2 new publications to teach undocumented immigrants how to deal with ICE.
I want the community to actually make sure that Americans feel safe, whether you're a citizen or a non-citizen.
Now, one of the publications is a comic book to teach kids how to protect their parents who are here illegally from law enforcement. Health organizations no longer recommend daily low-dose aspirin to prevent heart attacks. A new report said the benefits for older, healthy Americans are not worth the risk of internal bleeding. The pain reliever could still be a lifesaver, though, for those with past heart issues. And sleep experts sounding the alarm on the snooze button. Classic. A sleep wellness company sending a letter to Apple asking them to remove snooze from the next iPhone update. Experts say hitting snooze can disrupt REM sleep and send a sudden shock to the brain that in turn can raise blood pressure and heart rate.
So,
wow, I'm a huge snoozer. That happens to me every
that's
morning.
A problem. When the bell rings, you got to get up.
Well, it's often said it's not a good way to start a day procrastinating. Already, you're starting late to everything. Janestine, are you a snooze button person?
I can't be. We have to be here at like 3:30 in the morning. Hi, young man. What's your name?
Easton.
Where are you from?
Florida.
And what are the current conditions?
Mostly sunny and 35.
Yeah! And hello to the villages here, and you have a happy birthday.
Yeah, I want to say a happy birthday to my wife, Becky.
All right, Becky, let's take a look at the maps real quick. You know what? We have a serious issue we want to talk about, of course, across the Midwest. This is making headlines. We've got incredible flooding across portions of Nebraska and towards Iowa, the Missouri Valley, the Mississippi River Valley. We're watching those river gauges, flood advisories posted, prayers, of course, for all our friends in Nebraska and Iowa, all the way down the Mississippi River. This is going to be a big story, not only today, but throughout the next couple of weeks and the next few months. So we will be watching this weather very carefully. All right, wave to everybody at home, my loves. Yes, what a beautiful crowd this morning.
Welcome to New York. All right. Thanks, JD.
All right. Meanwhile, 11 minutes before the top of the hour, we're skidding towards the end. A Vietnam veteran fighting for 2 decades to fly a flag outside his home, and he finally won. That hero joins us live next.
And that is a special flag, by the way. Let's check in with Sandra Smith. Sandra, what happens on the channel in 10 minutes?
Hey, Steve, Brian, and Jedediah, good morning to you. We're going to have the latest on that shooting on a tram in the Netherlands. We're learning 1 person dead now, several wounded. The Dutch anti-terror threat has now been raised to its highest level. The shooter is still on the run. We're following all the latest developments on this for you. We'll have an update at the top of the hour. Plus, new reports North Korea may be considering missile testing again, how the White House is reacting this morning, and new developments in the Boeing investigation, what we are learning now. Monday morning in America's Newsroom. Join us, top of the hour.
Two decades ago, this Vietnam veteran was told by his homeowners association that the flagpole flying the American flag in his yard violated neighborhood bylaws.
But now, that vet, Richard Olden, can finally fly Old Glory once again, and it's all thanks to the help of Virginia Delegate John McGuire.
They both join us right now to share this incredible story. Gentlemen, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Richard, let's start with you. Why was it so important for you to fight your homeowners association for decades over flying a flag in front of your house?
Well, it was a memorial in my mind, personal, very private memorial, but to the men that I served with in Vietnam, with a unit called the Walking Dead Marines.
And in fact, there were
I wanted to fly in their honor.
749 Marines that you served with, right? This was for their memory.
749 casualties in my battalion, which was an 800-man battalion.
Gotcha.
So when you moved into this complex, did you know they had these rules, Richard?
No, there was nothing in the covenants about flagpoles. They covered compost piles and things like that, but not flagpoles.
Richard, talk to me a little bit about this particular flag that you know, this has been a long battle for you to ultimately gain the right to actually fly this flag. Talk about the flag that will ultimately be flown and what it means to you.
Well, it means a lot to me because it's the flag I flew over my bunker in Vietnam. I was in the northernmost position in Vietnam, 1 mile from North Vietnam. And I flew this on top of my bunker back in 1967 when I was wounded.
Okay, and that is so important, and that's it. John, I know you were a Navy SEAL. Why did you want to get involved in this fight?
You know, some people risk their time, some people risk their money, but our men and women in uniform oftentimes risk their life or even sacrifice their life for freedom. And I don't know if you knew the story, but about the time the story came out 16, 20 years ago, somewhere in there, that's when we were deploying troops to Iraq. So imagine if it was your son or daughter being deployed to Iraq, where you possibly wouldn't come home. And the one thing that unites our country is that flag. Doesn't matter if your political views, your religious view, male or female, whatever. That's the one thing that unites our country. And to be heard, told that this man couldn't have a flag. So when I got elected last year, I told Richard and his wife Ava that I was going to do everything I could to get that flagpole, get that flag back up.
And Richard, the bigger story is the Vietnam veterans didn't get the respect they deserve, and you're still fighting to get that respect. And this is just symbolic of that fight, right?
That's correct.
All right.
Very inspiring, both of you. Honestly, when I read this story, just in the face of defeat, to just keep coming back. This has been such a long fight. So I know everyone at home is also very inspired, really. Obviously, this meant a lot to you and to all of us as well.
And next month in your homeowners association, they're going to have a flag raising, and you got to send us a picture. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Richard, thank you very much. And John McGuire, you as well.
Thanks.
Good luck to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.